within a few months, we had sort of quantified the work that they had. And at first it's super overwhelming because it's like, oh my gosh, it's worse than we thought.
You're listening to the How Manufacturers Improve podcast, hosted by me, Kirby Sneen with the Manufacturers Alliance. If you've ever wondered how some manufacturing leaders have become so successful, then you're in the right place. In each episode, we cover the successes and lessons learned of industry leaders, and then I break it all down into actionable insights in our newsletter so that you can use them to make improvements. This episode's all about project management for manufacturers and features manufacturing executive Rodd Joos. Enjoy. Rodd, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Kirby. I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited about it.
Excited to get into our topic, project management for manufacturers. Before we get into that, before I talk to you about project scope, methodologies, selecting team members, kind of all the things, wanted you just to share your background, if you would first.
Sure, absolutely. So, I have an engineering background, product development, and design. More recently in my career, I've been in operations roles as well. So I've done product development, project management, operations management, general management. I've done some consulting, continuous improvement work, the gambit, with small companies more recently, but earlier in my career with large public companies and global roles. So kind of a variety of different roles, kind of on the technical and operations side.
So I wanted to talk about how frustrating it can be when a team is working on a project and it gets canceled or deferred and they don't get the satisfaction of completing it. And it wasn't quote unquote the right project, right? Because things get shifted around. How do you know when you're working on the right project? Yeah,
that's a good question. There's lots of ways to evaluate a project if it's good or not. The textbook answer is you have to look at your net present value or your internal rate of return or your ROI. But I think what's more important beyond that is to make sure that it's aligned to strategy. And you have to prioritize your projects. And a lot of times companies will take on more projects than they have capacity to do. Mm-hmm. And then they don't have good results because they haven't made enough progress on any one particular. So I think prioritization is really important and figuring out where, what's important and urgent kind of come together in selecting the right projects.
When you have those conversations around it being important, it's urgent, what's the net present value? I haven't heard that term in a while. I was excited to talk about that. You're thinking of ROI. What do those conversations sound like at the boardroom or at the Gemba to say, yes, this is aligned, and we know?
Yeah, sure. So, I think it has to check the box of it's going to pay itself back in a year, say, as an ROI measure, or it's going to have a certain rate of return. But beyond that, it also has to be, aligned to the rest of your strategy, so that you've got the team sort of pulling in a coherent direction. And also, I think focus is really important. As I was saying, I think a lot of teams get distracted by shiny objects, and they want to do more than they really can. So.
Let's talk about that. Can we hang out here for just a couple of minutes with this shiny objects? Because I have suffered, I'll be open about the fact that I have suffered from shiny red ball syndrome. And certainly have had my fair share of let's do something new, and it has been successful. Let's do something new. It hits a milestone, is successful, and then fails later. And then a few that have lasted much longer than I could have ever anticipated and have been very successful. But with these projects, whether it's associated with new product development or continuation engineering, how do we know when it's managed well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the traditional way would be with a scorecard, and it's a green, yellow, or red. But I was challenged once about that thinking. Somebody told me about this story that I'll share with you. So imagine two project managers in two different companies, but they don't know about each other, but they're executing the same project. And project manager A has a perfect scorecard. Everything's green and on track, and they get their project done in 6 months. And then you've got project manager B, who is a messy scorecard. It's all red, but it's done in 5 months. Which one is better? And initially I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, like the 5 months is better because you want to get it done faster, right? But I think it depends on the situation. And so I think what's interesting out of that story is, like what's important to you? What is it a customer need that it be on time? Then that's important. Is it under control and managing the stress of the team? Because that's a big consideration too. And so maybe that month worth of time is not worth burning out key employees. So I think it depends on the situation, but those are some of the things that I would look for beyond just the scorecard. How's the team reacting? And the other thing that I look for is that I think is really important is that how's the team doing, and are the members on that project challenged? And are they mastering their craft? Are they in their flow, as they say, where they're really engaged, or are they learning, or is it out of place for them and they're challenged and it's causing disruption to the organization?
So then, kind of just following what you're saying, once you've got the right project and you're starting to manage it well based on the situation and the outcomes that they're looking to accomplish, the culture in consideration, then what kind of methodologies are you using to manage projects? So like, for example, I'm familiar with Scrum. I know a lot of members use that one. It's always action-packed and features insights from industry leaders that you won't find anywhere else. Don't miss out. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe. It's free, actionable, and specifically for leaders in manufacturing that are looking for a better way. If that's you, subscribe today. All right, let's get back in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's Scrum and there's traditional waterfall or Gantt project management. I use a hybrid of both. So I learned Scrum when I was working with a team of software engineers alongside of mechanical engineers, and I learned some very interesting things about it that I think apply really nicely to more manufacturing related projects. And so I use a combination of both. What I like about Scrum is its agility of and the lightweight planning portion of it. So you don't have to spend so much time planning out everything. On the other hand, if you need to manage to a schedule, a timeline, then you need that higher level plan of when things are going to happen. And there's always, or often, points where something else is going to come in, and you have to schedule that, right? So you have to have. So to me, I think what's most efficient is to have both the high level Gantt view of what the project schedule is, but then on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, managing with stand-ups and Scrum works really well.
So I think you actually answered my next question already, or at least a facet of it, in terms of how to manage scope. Because scope creep is the item that I most often hear members kind of complain about.
Sure.
Like, oh, how do we make sure it stays within scope? It seems like customers don't always know what they want immediately. Or once you give them what they want, they say, yeah, but they want to add to it, right?
Right.
How have you managed scope over the years with the different projects you've been involved in?
Yeah. Well, I think that scope is a lever to use to manage projects because sometimes you want to increase scope because it makes sense, but like you said, there's often this tendency for things to grow beyond, and like, oh, if we just did this and this, it would add this much more value. But I think it's also interesting to look at cutting scope back. So in project management, there's this concept of the project management triangle: scope, time, and budget. And usually people sort of assume that scope is fixed, and they have to flex how much they spend on it or how long it takes to get the project done to achieve that scope. But sometimes, the timeline is more important. So in terms of like delivering something to a customer, sure, you want to exceed their expectations, but exceeding their expectations means adding scope. So if you can deliver on time by talking to the customer and helping them realize that they can get their product faster or their project completed done faster with by skipping a few of the scope items, then that might be a good decision to make. So it's not always the case that more scope is better, I would say. But intuitively it is, which is what leads to this common thing of scope creep.
So you've had to say no to stakeholders before to cut back.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you do that gracefully?
Well, I think just explaining that concept of, here's the scope and here's the budget and here's the timeline. Which of these things is the most important? And I've actually done this with customers where I'm working with a procurement person who cares about the cost. I'm working with a project manager at the customer that cares about the timeline, and then I'm working with maybe a product manager who cares about the scope. And so, kind of getting them together and saying, okay, I'm trying to meet the needs of all of you because we want to give you excellent service, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, but there's a little bit of conflict here, and when we as a team just have to decide what's the optimum solution. So how much do we spend on each of those?
So then maybe this thought helps define optimum solutions in those scenarios. When we had talked before we hit record, we were actually talking about Fibonacci sequences. And I'm fascinated with golden ratios and Fibonacci sequences. It was when I was actually, I believe in middle school, I was introduced to the Taj Mahal. And I'm like, this infrastructure, this build, it's beautiful. And my instructor said, well, there's a reason you're I and you think it's beautiful. And I said, well, what is that? And so that's when I got introduced to golden ratios, and I started to measure symmetry and points, distance between 2 points.
Yeah.
And then translate that into beauty. So beauty defined in numbers.
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated when I look at any piece of artwork or infrastructure, you name it, and I can go and see those Fibonacci sequences.
Yeah.
Whether it's man-made or nature, right?
Yeah. Because it shows up in nature a lot too.
Yes. And I love it. I'm fascinated with it. So when you mention its application in project management, I wanted to ask you more about how you're using it.
Sure. Yeah. So people that are familiar with Scrum will be familiar with assigning points to stories, to tasks, and often when you're doing that, you're using the Fibonacci sequence to limit the choices of estimates that you come up with. So for me, what I've implemented is each task should be between an hour to 40 hours. At a maximum, and so and if it's bigger than that, you should break it down to smaller chunks. If it's less than an hour, don't bother measuring it, right? So in between that, how do you assign an hour's estimate to a task? So you use the Fibonacci sequence. So it's and for those that don't know, the Fibonacci sequence is the addition of the two previous numbers. So you start with 0 and 1. 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 8, 13, etc. And so as the numbers get higher, the space between those numbers is larger. And that matches really well with the human ability to estimate how long a task is going to take, because the longer the task is, the less precision you're going to have. And the point here is that you don't want to spend a lot of time on estimation. You want to just come to a quick a general idea of how long something's going to take. And so, and this is a really powerful part of Scrum in manufacturing, I think, is that this gives you a way to estimate how long something's going to take, but then also it can turn into actuals, because you don't measure the actual time it took you to complete that task, but you count how many of those tasks you completed in a given period. And then you can count that up, and that tells you how many points or hours worth of capacity you have in a given time period for an individual, for a team, whatever it might be. And as long as you're consistent about your estimates, you can have this accuracy, because it's sort of self calibrating.
Yeah.
Because if you've got somebody that underestimates or somebody that overestimates, as long as they're consistent, then it's always very accurate over time. And if it's a team, then you can do something called playing Scrum poker, which is where you have a deck of cards that are in the Fibonacci sequence, and you look at a task, and everybody lays down a card, and then you just kind of quickly come to a consensus of what the point value should be for that particular task.
I love it. Do you got a, for instance, throughout your career where you've used it that you could share real quick? Maybe just a quick story around that?
Sure. I mean, my favorite story is that trying to get a team to improve their delivery, their on-time delivery, and they didn't know where they were in terms of how good or bad their delivery was, or what their capacity was. And so by implementing this system, within a few months, we had sort of quantified the work that they had. And at first it's super overwhelming, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's worse than we thought. Like, it was unknown is scary, but then knowing it's this big is like really scary. But then, once you get your hands around that, and you can identify your bottlenecks, and you can start to make changes to what you're doing to make it more efficient, and then your efficiency improves, and then you start to accelerate that capacity, and so then you start to get through it really quickly. So with the team that I'm talking about, we went from realizing we had 2 years worth of work, but then 6 months later we had completed it all.
Love it.
So
it sounds like a success story.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about team members for a bit. Mm-hmm. How do you identify the quote unquote right team member? And then, what's your method to the madness? I think about, the mission at hand, the goals to accomplish. And then I think about certain skill sets that each individual has, and maybe past experiences. And I think, do I need someone that's kind of wondering a lot and asking why all the time? Or do I need someone that's the contrarian and always saying, okay, yes, if this is going to happen, or if that happens, that'll be successful, a little bit of a contrarian. Or sometimes just people with a lot of tenacity, like we'll be able to just get it done.
Yeah.
And just trying to be strategic about it. So what would you add?
Absolutely. Well, I love that you bring all those things up, because I think those are really important things to think about. It's more than just who has the right technical skills to get this project done. I guess the thing I would add is it's also a great training opportunity. So I think projects, Kaizen events are like projects, right? And a concept in Kaizens is always to bring people in that haven't done them before, and train them, because they both learn how to do it, and then they also provide that outsider's perspective. I think the same is true with any project. So if you can identify folks that maybe aren't the obvious choice for that project, but they might add something like either that outside perspective, or one of the characteristics you talked about, like maybe they're a diplomat, and so they're good at sort of helping people come to consensus, or maybe they're the contrarian that's going to poke and challenge the engineers that have done this type of project a zillion times, and so they're sort of set in, this is how you do it. So I think those are really important. Another important consideration, especially for smaller companies where you don't have as many folks to sort of choose from, it's important to remember that for some types of projects, it's like that's what people do, like a design engineer, like everything they do is a project. For others, especially like in production or quality teams, projects are a part-time job, and so I think it's being conscious of what's their bandwidth, what's what do they have available in terms of their time to contribute.
Have you ever been on a project team or led a project team and personalities just start to clash? Sometimes there's big personalities with engineering teams, I know. So
yeah,
what do you do in those scenarios?
Yeah, that of course that happens. And the other one I've seen is a lot, especially with engineering teams, is somebody that dominates the room. because a lot of engineers tend to be quieter, and so they're silently disagreeing. But while somebody keeps taking all the oxygen in the room, so to speak. So I think it's in those cases, as a facilitator or project manager, I have done, and what I've seen others do is like specifically call out on other people. Obviously, you have to be careful about that because you don't want to make somebody uncomfortable. But calling out to like, okay, so say Joe or Beth or whoever, what do you think about this? I think you might have a different perspective here, and sort of like encourage that person to weigh in or to lead the conversation somewhere else.
That's good. That way it gives them some space to contribute if they want to.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so then before I let you go, I wanted to just pick your brain about AI. I have been using AI every single day since I feel like, gosh, what was it? Really this last fall, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've been using it quite a bit too to do research, and it's been interesting.
So I, even just before you came into the studio, I was doing a quick before. I'll show you this, a quick before and after. So an actual picture of a workstation and department, actually. And then I said, hey, apply Visual Management 5S. And I gave it, like 6 points
really?
In my prompt. And I said, create a future state. It's so much fun.
Interesting.
Because, I think it's a great, just way for a team to be able to say, okay, I know what visual management is. I know what 5S is. I know this place is a mess, but I wonder what we could really turn it into. And it can start to paint that picture of what the vision could be. I'll show it to you when we're done. But How are you seeing AI impact project management, or even what do you foresee in the future?
Yeah. So, to be honest, I have not seen it applied yet to project management, but I think as I imagine it, I think there's tons of opportunities. So one thing that comes immediately to mind is, I've seen a lot of these AI tools that will create meeting notes for you, right? So it's listening in, it can provide a full transcription, or it can summarize. And I think the next step from that would be then, okay, have that AI, plugged into who are the team members and what are their skills, and assign those tasks to team members. Another application would be to update schedules. There's a lot of administrative work that a project manager has to do, right? Updating schedules, keeping stakeholders informed. So I think AI could be a great tool to help with that. Generating weekly reports, just being able to pull from the notes that the team is keeping. And then also optimizing resource allocations. That seems like a great application of AI, especially if it, and I don't know how this would work exactly, but if the AI system could have visibility to the allocation of the different people that are working on a project, it could very quickly optimize for who should be working on this task or that task. And then another thing is I think AI is really powerful at connecting data and turning data into information, connecting different systems. And so, a lot of projects require information coming from your ERP system, your MES system, maybe your website. And so using AI to tie those together to inform a project, I think there's tons of opportunity there too. So I'm excited to see what the industry does with all those opportunities.
I almost hired our first digital worker.
Really?
Nearly 6-figure salary for not a person, a digital worker.
Is that right?
If I would have had our processes more dialed in, and we've got some work to do, I think I would have pulled the trigger.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, that speaks to the value of it.
There's just so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really exciting to talk to you about AI, talk to you about project management, specifically for manufacturers. Rodd, it's an honor.
Thank you, Kirby. It's been fun. Thanks.
I'm Kirby Sneen with the Manufacturers Alliance, and this is the How Manufacturers Improve podcast. If you like learning these high-level best practices from experienced peers, and you want your team to be able to connect with people they can trust, see what's possible, and develop new lean and leadership skills when it works for them, go to mfrall.com or just click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.